Bullying is behavior that's done with real intent to harm. It's not something that's casual. It's very directed and it's very intentional. And it's meant to harm either physically, emotionally, or socially. The behavior is done where there's an imbalance between the victim and the bully. And this difference can be size, age, social status. The social status is the one, especially between girls. I didn't have to deal with that. Bullying behavior is generally repeated over time. And it takes many forms: physical, punching, hitting, spitting, kicking, verbal, name-calling, teasing. This is really common. Emotional, such as nonverbal gestures, trying to isolate somebody socially, manipulation, or in the case of Tourette, imitating the tics. And of course, the new and most wonderful type of bullying, cyberbullying. Yeah. So the question is, my husband and I were talking about this, when does friendly teasing become bullying, and how do we know the difference between teasing and bullying? Is a child who sticks out her tongue one time at another child bullying? As somebody called my husband and said, "This child's bullying my child," and he said, "What happened?" "Well, she stuck her tongue at him." I'm not so sure about that. When friends are teasing each other, there's a give and take, and there's smiles, and there's laughter. When it's bullying, one child will appear to be unhappy or sad or scared or uncomfortable. Adults need to watch and listen and see the child's verbal or facial reaction to really know and observe whether it's teasing or bullying. And you really do get a sense of that, but you have to really take the time to watch it. Who's most likely to be bullied? Children who don't get along well with others, who are less popular, have few or no friends, don't conform to gender norms, have low self-esteem, are anxious or depressed. Does this sound familiar? Something about Tourette Syndrome? The reality is that 75 to 80% of children with some form of a disability, not just Tourette, 75 to 80% of kids with a disability are bullied. 75 to 80% of the kids with a disability walking into your schools every day are victims of bullying. That's a staggering number. You translate that into take a look long term and look at the graduation rate for kids who are with disabilities who are being bullied, and the graduation rate is significantly lower than their typical peers. Therefore, we have to do something for them. These are kids who have no large peer group, they are more likely to be isolated, and they're more vulnerable. Therefore, they're more likely to react. A vulnerable child is going to react to the bullying. He's going to cry, he or she is going to cry, they're going to run away, or they'll have a tantrum. And what does that do for the bully? Reinforces everything that they're getting from the bullying. It's exactly the reaction that they want. That's what they get their power from, is from that reaction. So some signs of the students being bullied, other than the ones that you may observe in an interaction between two kids. Student reports losing things, books, their electronics, their clothing. A child who complains frequently of headaches, stomach aches, or feeling sick. Has changes in his or her eating habits. A child who's hurting themselves. A child who's cutting. Is afraid to go to school or to other activities with peers. Loses interest in school or begins to do very poorly in school. Appears to be sad or moody or angry, anxious or depressed when they come home from school. Suddenly has fewer friends. Was very popular at one point and now suddenly has fewer friends. Avoids going certain places. Demonstrates changes in behavior. These are all symptoms that a child may be bullying. I know, Judy, you had a story about that.
When our son was in middle school, we had purchased for him a special jacket that was just becoming very popular. And he was one of the few that had gotten one at that point. And one day he came home without it, said it was missing, and I thought, oh, he's losing things again, like he did a lot because he couldn't keep track of his things very well. And I few weeks later in the school year, he came home with a bag, and it was his jacket, which had been found behind a bookcase, and it had paint poured all over it, and it had been hidden behind a bookcase. And we got a phone call from a mom, and she said, my son and I would like to come down and visit with you and your son. And she came to our house and told her son to ask our son about his Tourette syndrome. And we explained what Tourette syndrome was all about at that time to him. And the mom said, well, our son is going to work every week for $5, and then he's going to come down to the house and bring your son $5 until he's paid for his share of that jacket. I was thinking that was a great way to do it. Of course, we never heard from the other culprit and his mom. But that brings me to remember that we wanted to inform the other students at the school what Tourette syndrome was, what this was all about, and they didn't want us to. They didn't want us to do any peer trainings.
In addition, kids are not likely to admit it, but typical kids are scared of kids with TS. Think about it. You see another child who is yelling things out, making unusual sounds, making unusual motions. They're scared about that, and sometimes the associated disorders. And very often, especially younger children, are afraid they're going to catch it. I worked with a young boy who was in 5th grade. I had started working with him when he was in 4th grade. In 5th grade, I got a call. I was director of special education at the time, and the director in his particular building called me, and she said he was having a problem. Would I come over? And I went to his school, and I met with him, and I said, what's going on? Having a bad day. His head was down. I'm having a bad day. I said, what's happening? The F word is back. He was having a bout of coprolalia. It happened to be the springtime, and his tics always got worse during the spring because he had bad allergies, and it seemed to make the tics worse. So he was saying the F word. So I found the director for his school, and I left him with the school psychologist, and the director and I went up to his class, because the kids were all, again, teaming. The kids were in teams. And we went up to his class, and we talked about him. We got his permission. We went up to his class, and we talked to the other kids in his class. And we said he was having a rough time because his allergies were bad, and his Tourette's, his coprolalia was pretty bad at that particular time. And that he was saying the F word, and that we knew that, and he was not saying it at them. It was just part of his Tourette. And the kids asked questions, and the question that I remember most clearly was a little, precious little girl raised her hand, 5th grader. She said, can I sit next to him at lunch? And I said, of course. Why do you ask? She said, well, can I catch it? Even though they had already been trained once before, because there had been an exacerbation of his tics, and now he was saying the F word, she was afraid that she could catch it. Kathy, did you have a story?
Yeah, I have a story about some teasing and bullying that I think a lot of teachers miss, because lots of times teasing and bullying can happen in a way that is very, very subtle and specific to symptoms of Tourette. Remember I told you Matthew used to have to sit next to the windows because of germs. Well, the most horrible germs, other than my husband's, were if anybody burped. Burping germs were death. And in this particular classroom, there were no windows. And so he was sitting in a seat, and this one boy would constantly walk past him and burp right when he got to his desk. Now, nobody saw that as teasing and bullying, but Matthew stopped wanting to go to school. His grades started dropping. Every time before that class, he would end up at the nurse's office. And so finally we said, what's going on? And he finally admitted it. The kids don't like to admit it because they want to be normal. And it's weird, and they don't like to be weird. So this kid was bullying Matthew pretty significantly because he would ruin the rest of his classroom because now the germs were all over Matt from the burping.
My son Eric was not bullied when he was a child, or not very much. When he got to college, he went through freshman and sophomore year without a problem. And as I had said earlier today, during junior year, his tics came back with a vengeance, and he was barking, and a kid in his dorm yelled at him, "Shut up or I'll beat you." He said a few other things, but we'll leave those out. And every time this kid saw him, he yelled at him to shut up. And then one day, Eric got a note tacked to his door. There were bulletin boards on all the kids' doors in their dorm room. And it was a note that was written using the letters from a magazine. Somebody had taken the time. He should have been studying. Whoever this kid was, he should have been studying. Took the time to take magazine letters and cut them all out and wrote a very threatening note to Eric. "I know you're doing this on purpose. I don't believe that you can't control this. Shut up or I'm going to blah, 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 blah." Eric had approached the administration. There were only 1,100 students in his college. He had approached the administration and asked them if he could send an email to everybody explaining about the Tourette. And the answer had been no. And he had tried a number of times to do this. So and really he was a terrific advocate for himself. He was doing Tourette speaking with me. He really knew how to do this. So finally he said to me, "Mom, I need some help." I said, "Okay." So I called the president's office. And I said, "I'd like to speak to the president of the college." It's a very small place. So the president's assistant said to me, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Well, maybe you can. I'd like my son to be able to send out a email explaining his Tourette syndrome." "Oh, we don't do that here." I said, "Really?" I said, "Okay. I'd like to have a 504 plan written for my son. And the only accommodation I'm looking for is to have him be able to send out an email explaining his Tourette syndrome." So the woman said to me, "Well, I'm not an expert in 504 plans." And I said, "I am." So she said, "Well, I'll get back to you." I said, "Okay." I waited a little while, called back again, nothing. Then my husband called. As my son will say, a big burly guy called them. And the dean of the college called my husband back and tripped over his tongue saying, "Of course we'll let you send out this email." So Eric sent an email. He wrote a really, really, really nice 1-2 paragraph email. He vetted it through the dean of the college and sent it to the entire college. He got 40 responses, including one that was sent anonymously. I still don't know how you send an anonymous email. But they were all people saying, "How courageous of you. I'm so glad to know about this. I never heard of Tourette syndrome. Thanks for telling me." One person said, I have an artificial limb. Somebody said that she was missing a kidney. They all talked about what their disabilities were and how courageous he was. Maybe they could talk about their problems now. But the one anonymous email was, "I was one of the people who was yelling at you, and I'm really sorry." The point of this is that bullying can go on way beyond grade school and even high school. It can go on into college. And as much as we try to stay way in the background in college, I've said to other parents before, sometimes, even in college, you have to be the parent and take a step in and say, "Yes, we'll help." So that was his most significant bullying story. So what do you do for a child with Tourette's who's being bullied? We talked earlier today about role-playing responses with that child that might work for them. Talk about letting that child know who it's okay to talk to, an adult that he can talk to about being teased or bullied. Discuss specific adults in the building that the child can go to. We talked about that earlier. Be very specific. Is it the administrator, the nurse, the guidance counselor, a particular teacher that he or she likes? Train everyone in the school. Everyone. From the administration, sometimes they need more training than anybody else, to the teachers, the cafeteria worker, the custodian, the paraprofessionals, and don't forget the bus drivers. It's really, really important that everyone knows about it because they really will support this child. How do you prevent a child who lives with Tourette syndrome from being bullied? Let's go back for a minute to the first slide of the day. The quote that I read to you, "I can be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. I can humiliate or honor, hurt or heal. In all situations, it is my response that decides whether a crisis will be escalated or de-escalated and a child humanized or dehumanized." In your classroom, you will decide whether that child will be bullied because the way you treat that child, the example that Kathy gave was perfect. Because that teacher chose not to focus on Matthew's response and just went right through it, that Matt was completely humanized, and the other children learned that it was really okay to have Tourette in that classroom. That's what he needed. That's what all kids, I'd like to clone that teacher. For every child with Tourette, for every child with a neurobiological condition, whatever it is. It's the atmosphere in the building that's going to determine how that child's going to do. There's lots and lots of information on the TSA website. You have that information, the website address in your packet. Kathy's written a really interesting article about that. Sandra did a bullying video with somebody else that's really, really good. I would recommend those. And there's also a website called stopbullyingnow.gov, which was an excellent website. So don't let our kids be bullied, please. So how do you stop bullying? Give kids credit. When you tell kids about a situation, they will rise to the occasion. They will rise to the challenge. Every single time Eric did a TikTok or we did a workshop together, any bullying or any issue stopped completely. As Judy just said, if the kids in Kevin's school had known about the Tourette, likelihood is that maybe there's some jerks, somebody would have stolen the jacket, but it would have been a lot less likely. Over and over again, we found that. Eric went to sleepaway camp, which was very courageous on the camp's part. It was about an hour from our house. And at the first dinner at camp, and it was a religious camp, so they already were sort of on board. The first 5 minutes of dinner of the first night of camp, Eric gave a TikTok. Hi, I'm Eric. I have Tourette Syndrome. These are the kinds of things I might say. This is what I might do. Don't take it personally. It's just part of who I am. It's a neurological disorder. Have a great summer. And it really wasn't a problem. He just sailed through camp. He did it at religious school, and wherever he goes, he does a lot of public speaking now in a variety of venues, and he always starts with, hey, you may hear some unusual sounds. It's just part of who I am. Important thing to do is do peer training. Can the child with Tourette help with the peer training? My little 5th grader turned into a 7th grader a couple of years ago, and we did the training together with his new middle school. My system was a 5-6 middle school and a 7-8 middle school. So when it came to the 7-8 middle school, I said to him, do you want to do this training with me? Sure. Training took twice as long because he talked a lot. He's actually going to high school next year, and I was in conversation with him about a month ago, and I said to him, so what do you want to do about high school? He said, well, I'm going to do a TIC conversation with the teachers. I said, of course you are. I said, do you want to do it alone? He said, no, I'd like you to be there. I said, okay, we'll do it together. It's so empowering. And even young children can help teach their peers. They don't have to do a lot, but just being there and saying 1 or 2 things about their tics. You can do the majority of it, or the mom can do, or dad can do the majority of it. But if a child can say a little bit about what it's like to live with Tourette, it is so empowering to stand before their peers and being able to talk about it. And that's really not an age thing. That's really who the child is. I've seen 3rd graders able to do it and high schoolers who couldn't. It depends on how shy they are, how anxious they are. My child, he just talks all the time, so it's not, I wonder where he got that from. So you'd start the peer training by discussing something that kids have in common. In the elementary group, I used to start them with, can you change your eye color? Could you remove your freckles? Or is that something you're born with? Adolescents, I always used to start with, what would you do if you woke up in the morning and you had a zit? Or mom forgot to wash your favorite jeans? How would you feel? How would that day go? Kids don't like to feel that way. And then we would move to either talking, depending on the students in front of me, do you know as I said this morning, do you know anyone who has asthma? They use an inhaler. Would you make fun of somebody who has asthma? Of course not. Then introduce Tourette Syndrome. With Tourette's, your brain is lacking, as Sandra talked about, stop signs. So when you have TS, your body will do things you don't want it to do. And kids will really say, Really? You're doing things you can't stop it? Nope, can't stop it. And then define the tic. Talk about motor tics as being rapid and repetitive and give some examples. Eye blink, shoulder shrug. Do the exercise about the eye blink. It worked with you. Vocal tic, talk about the sniffing, the throat clearing. I always, when I'm doing a workshop around a specific child, ask what the specific child's tics are at that moment in time or what the recent ones have been, and use those as examples. We tell kids that the cause of TS is not known, but we do know that there's a hereditary component, and then we talk about what that means. What is hereditary? Do you have the same hair color as your mom or dad? Do you look like your grandmother? Do you have some similarities to your cousin? My son's baby picture looks exactly like my niece's baby picture. Can barely tell them apart. That's part of heredity. Then we talk about the perceptions and the reactions. We talk about the fact, again, that it's not contagious, that you won't die from it, that it doesn't have anything to do with how smart you are, and you're not, and a child with Tourette is not crazy. And what we try and do is elicit from the kids in the training, so what's so bad about having Tourette's? Well, people make fun of you, and they imitate you because you're different and because they don't understand it. More importantly, or as important, tics can interfere with things you want to do. Makes it hard to read sometimes or to write. Can't always go to the movies when you want to. Can't always do the things that you want to do because the Tourette may be interfering with your life at that moment. And tics can hurt. When you have repetitive movement all the time, some parts of your body can really hurt a lot. Kids with Tourette can come home after they've been ticking all day, and they have a lot of muscle soreness. What does it feel like to have Tourette's? It's a great question to ask a group that you're doing peer training. Has anyone ever made fun of you for something you can't control? How did it make you feel? Have you ever had a sneeze that you were trying to hold in? How did it feel? Did it affect your concentration? Imagine having that feeling all day. You can try to suppress it, but eventually it's going to come out. Do you ever get a song stuck in your head? All the questions we talked about this morning. And then part of peer training is to talk about the teasing and the bullying versus empathy or understanding and respect. Why it's important to be understanding of others and why it's important to be respected. The TSA Ambassador Program we talked about this morning is really fabulous. And as I said this morning, there's a video on that on the TSA website. The goal of this exciting program is to educate children all over the country about TS, a widely misunderstood disorder. We are following the motto, think globally, act locally. The goal of the TSA Youth Ambassador Program is understanding and tolerance. Don't we wish that for all of our kids? Thank you.